What if I told you that a man can love you, want you, and even build a life with you and still never attach to you? That's the quiet wound so many carry but don't speak of. You feel his presence, his body next to you, his hands on your skin. But his soul's still locked in a place you can't reach. And no matter how much you give, how soft you become, how understanding, how patient, you never really arrive in his heart. But something strange happens when a man is emotionally attached. You don't have to beg. You don't have to remind. He's there, not just in words or plans, but in the deepest parts of his being. Something changes. His rhythm bends toward you. His eyes soften. His silence starts to speak. And what it says is, I'm staying. This video is for the listener who has wondered why it always feels like she's the one doing the holding, the one remembering, the one keeping things alive. It's for the ones who've mistaken effort for love. And it's also for the men who have found themselves afraid to fully feel but are tired of being disconnected from the very thing they crave most. Real closeness. You're not broken for wanting to be seen. You're not weak for needing more. And you're not too much just because you've known too little of what it feels like to be truly chosen. Today, we're going to look at the quiet signs, things that most men won't even recognize in themselves, that reveal when a man is no longer just with you, but of you. Not out of need, not out of routine, but from something much deeper. And somewhere in these words, you might finally understand why it never worked before, and why it can. If anything here touches a part of you you've hidden, held, or hardened, stay. Let's breathe into the truth together. And if this is the kind of space your heart needs more of, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, share it with someone who feels too much but says too little. You're not alone here. There's something almost imperceptible that shifts in a man when he's emotionally attached. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it doesn't scream romance or echo through grand gestures, but it lingers. It shows up in the in-between. The first sign is simple, but it's everything. He remembers the things you forget you even said, not the big things. Not your birthday or the name of your dog. Those are easy. But the tiny details you spoke in passing. How the smell of jasmine reminds you of your grandmother. That you feel safest when someone strokes your hair slowly, not fast. That you like your tea a little too bitter. Because it reminds you that not everything has to be sweet to be good. You didn't ask him to remember those things. You didn't pause for effect or underline them in your voice, but he held on to them. Why? Because emotional attachment makes memory effortless. When a man is truly connected to you, not just physically or intellectually, but soul deep, he starts storing pieces of you without even trying. Not out of duty, not because he should, but because your world begins to become his world. Your details become part of his internal landscape. And this isn't about manipulation or trying to impress you. That's what men do when they're performing connection, not feeling it. This is quieter than that. It's when he's out somewhere and sees something, a song, a book, a place, and without hesitation, his first thought is, you. Not because he planned to, because his heart moved in that direction on its own. Somewhere, in the privacy of his thoughts, you've taken up space. Not the kind of space that displaces him, the kind that expands him. Gently, softly, unshakably. And yet, many women don't even notice when this happens, because they're used to being forgotten, overlooked, talked at, but not listened to. They don't expect someone to remember what matters to them unless it's convenient. So when a man brings up something she said weeks ago, something small, something seemingly insignificant, she thinks it's coincidence. Or maybe kindness. But it's more than that. It's the first whisper of, I see you. I carry you with me, even when you're not around. This kind of attachment isn't fast. It's not urgent or chaotic. In fact, it often emerges after the chaos is gone, when the drama fades, when he's not chasing novelty, when you're not trying to prove your worth. Emotional attachment begins where performance ends. But here's where it gets more tender, and perhaps more painful. Some of you listening have never had that moment, never been remembered like that. You've had men bring you flowers, sure, maybe even take you to Paris, but never recall the exact way you cried that night you talked about your father. Never say, I saw this and thought of the way you light up when you talk about the ocean. Never, ever make you feel like your essence, not your image, was the part they loved most, so you started to believe that was too much to hope for. But it's not. When a man is emotionally attached, you don't have to constantly ask him where you stand. He tells you without speaking, with his attention, his presence, his memory, his resonance. He carries the pieces of you that even you sometimes forget are there. That's how you'll know. There's a second shift that happens, one that speaks even louder than memory. He starts to protect not just you, but your inner world. And this part, it breaks people open. Because we've been taught that protection means putting an arm around your shoulder when you cross the street, or stepping in when someone disrespects you. But that's surface-level protection. Real emotional attachment shows up when a man becomes fiercely gentle with your soul, when he begins to guard your vulnerability like it's something sacred. Because to him it is. He stops making jokes at your expense, even the playful ones, because he notices the flicker in your eyes when you laugh but don't really mean it. He doesn't dismiss your worries just because they don't make sense to him. He leans in instead, quiet, attentive, curious. Not to solve, not to fix, but to feel what you're feeling. This isn't about walking on eggshells. This is about reverence. When a man is emotionally attached, he becomes deeply aware that your emotions are not just mood swings or fleeting dramas. He begins to understand that every reaction, every silence, every tear holds history, and even if he doesn't know the full story, he starts to act as though your softness is worth sheltering. And maybe, for some of you listening, this is the part that hits the hardest, because you've never known that kind of safety in love. You've known the kind where you had to explain yourself over and over again, hoping he'd finally get it. You've known the kind where your pain was inconvenient, your needs were too much, and your sadness made him uncomfortable. So you shrunk. You learned to cry quietly, to speak less, to preface every feeling with, "I'm sorry, I know this sounds crazy." And slowly, silently, you started to disconnect from your own self just to maintain connection with someone else. But when a man is attached to your soul, not just your smile, everything changes. He begins to look at your emotions as if they were made of stained glass. Fragile, yes, but beautiful. Worth preserving. Worth understanding. And even when he doesn't understand them, he doesn't retreat. He stays. He starts asking questions like, "What do you need right now?" Or "Do you want comfort or solutions?" Not because he read it in a book, not because he learned some communication strategy, but because he feels your interior landscape as something real, something alive, something that matters. That's the quiet beauty of emotional attachment. He stops being afraid of your depth. He stops seeing your sadness as a threat to his masculinity, and starts seeing it as an invitation into your truth, into the parts of you that not everyone gets to see. The uncurated moments, the trembling, the ache, the longing, and for the first time, perhaps ever, you feel like you can stop managing his perception of you. You can fall apart, and he won't turn away. You can be unsure, and he won't rush you into clarity. You can be fully human, and he will stay. Not because you're easy, not because everything's perfect, but because emotional attachment makes him feel your pain as shared, not separate. When a man reaches this place, his protectiveness no longer looks like fixing. It looks like presence. And presence, my love, is the most sacred form of protection we will ever know. And then there's the third shift, the one that most people overlook, because it doesn't come with fireworks or declarations. He lets you in, not into his bed, not into his plans, into his silence. You see, most men are not taught how to be emotionally open. They're taught how to perform strength, how to fix, how to win. But when he's emotionally attached, something sacred begins to unravel inside him. The armor starts to loosen. The walls he's kept up not just around others, but around himself start to soften in your presence. He doesn't just want you to know him, he wants you to see him. And that's the scariest thing he'll ever do, because it's not easy for him to admit that he's scared too, that he has wounds, that sometimes he feels like a failure, that there are days he doesn't know what he's doing with his life, or if he's even enough. He starts to let the mask slip. He lets you hear the pause in his voice when he talks about his father. He lets you sit with him in the quiet moments when he feels lost. Instead of covering it up with distraction, he lets you see him when he's not on, not strong, not impressive, just him. And the thing is, he wouldn't do that if he didn't trust your heart, because emotional attachment is not about control. It's about surrender. He opens his world, not just the curated parts, but the messy, confusing, unresolved parts, and he allows you to exist inside it. Not to fix it, not to judge it, but just to witness it. And in that witnessing, something rare is born. Intimacy. True intimacy. Not the kind built on lust or shared hobbies or even shared goals, but the kind built on mutual unmasking. The kind where two people stop performing, stop pleasing, stop proving, and just become real. So if a man begins to tell you about his past, his regrets, the things that keep him up at night, if he starts to ask questions like, "Do you ever feel like you're pretending?" Or, "What do you think your purpose really is?" If he looks at you during the quietest moments, not when you're dressed up, not when you're laughing, but when you're soft and still, and says you feel like home, know this: you're not just in his life, you're inside him now. He's made a place for you, not because he had to, but because he couldn't not. And that kind of access, that kind of inner opening is not casual. It's not given to just anyone. It's sacred. It's terrifying. And it means more than any bouquet of roses ever could. But this is the part where you must listen carefully. Because emotional attachment doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It doesn't always mean constant communication or perfect plans. Sometimes it means discomfort, resistance. A man who's learning how to feel again after years of numbness. It means growing pains, tender stumbles, emotional echoes that linger longer than you'd like. But when he lets you in, truly in, you will feel it. Not in what he says, but in what he's no longer trying to hide. And in a world where men are taught to be everything but vulnerable, that is one of the greatest acts of love he could ever offer you. And perhaps the most beautiful yet most misunderstood part of emotional attachment is this: he starts to change without you asking him to. Not because you gave him an ultimatum, not because you cried again, not because you threatened to walk away, but because being close to your heart is awakening something in his. Something old, something buried, something sacred. You see, when a man is emotionally attached, he doesn't want to lose the connection, not just with you, but with the version of himself he becomes when he's with you. He starts to notice his own patterns. He becomes aware of the walls he's built, the habits he's clung to, the ways he used to disappear when things got too real. And for the first time, he doesn't run from that awareness. He sits with it, wrestles with it, softens into it, because suddenly, growth doesn't feel like a threat to his freedom. It feels like a path toward you. He starts showing up on time, not because he's afraid of your reaction, but because he's realizing that being unreliable hurts him too. It creates distance between the connection he craves and the man he's been. He starts responding with more honesty, not because you demanded truth, but because the lies don't feel necessary anymore. He doesn't want to protect his ego at the cost of your trust. He starts listening differently, not to defend himself, but to understand where he still has work to do. And that's the shift that changes everything, because the truth is, we cannot heal what we are not willing to face. And when he loves you from a distance, he doesn't have to face much. He can coast, hide, stay in the shallow end. But when his soul is tied to yours, when your laughter feels like light in his darkness, when your pain feels like a mirror to his own, he starts to want to grow. Not for you, for the connection, for the truth, for the kind of love that doesn't require masks or armor. And maybe you've never seen this before. Maybe you've only known love that demanded your silence, love that asked you to shrink, love where only you evolved, hoping he'd catch up. But emotional attachment is different. It's mutual, it's raw, it's real. And sometimes it looks like a man sitting in his car after a fight, realizing for the first time in his life that he actually wants to understand why he gets triggered. It looks like him reaching out not hours later, but minutes, because something inside him hurts when there's distance between you. It looks like him apologizing without needing to be right, taking accountability without needing to be punished, trying again not because he fears losing you, but because he values keeping you. And sometimes it's quiet. It's the way he changes his tone when he notices it made you flinch, the way he puts his phone down when you speak, the way he starts remembering not just your words, but your silences. You didn't ask him to change. You didn't write him a list of conditions. You just kept showing up as you, whole, honest, open. And in doing that, you gave him something he didn't know he needed, a safe place to become more than he was taught to be. That's emotional attachment, not him becoming perfect, but him becoming willing. But what happens when this kind of man, this emotionally attached man, crosses paths with a woman who doesn't believe she deserves it. She questions it. She waits for the shift, the change, the sudden turn, like all the others. Because when you've loved people who only held parts of you, a man who chooses all of you can feel threatening. You might tell yourself he's too sensitive, that his presence is too much, that he's imagining the depth, that maybe he's just lonely, or confused, or idealizing something that isn't real. But what if he isn't? What if he sees you not through fantasy, but through clarity? Not because you're perfect, but because you're real with him. What if your softness didn't scare him but saved him? See, emotional attachment doesn't only change him, it changes you. You start to see yourself through his eyes. You start to feel what it's like to be cherished in moments when you aren't trying to be anything. When your hair's undone, and your guard's down, and your voice trembles when you talk about something that hurt. And he stays. Not only stays, but moves closer. That closeness, that terrifying, soul-bearing closeness, it awakens parts of you that you've buried for years. The little girl inside who used to talk too much, feel too deeply, laugh too loudly, cry when the world felt sharp. She starts to peek out again, because this kind of love, this depth of connection, it doesn't ask you to manage yourself. It invites you to remember yourself, and maybe that's the quiet tragedy of what so many have mistaken for love in the past. The way we contorted ourselves into palatable versions, the way we became masterful at pleasing and pleasing and pleasing, until the only thing left of us was a shadow. But when a man is emotionally attached, he doesn't want your shadow. He wants your sun, your storm, your chaos, your calm. He wants you, not the version you curated to keep someone from leaving. Because this man isn't looking for someone to fit neatly into his life. He's looking for someone who makes him feel alive in his life. And when he finds that in you, he doesn't just hold on, he honors it. You'll hear it in the way he says your name. Like it's something holy, like it carries weight, like it's not just a label but a language only the two of you understand. You'll feel it in the space between his words, where nothing needs to be said because everything is already felt. You'll know it, not because he says I love you first, but because when he does, it sounds like the most natural truth in the world. And if you're listening to this and thinking, I don't know if I've ever had that, please hear this. It doesn't mean you're unworthy of it. It means no one ever stayed long enough or deep enough to show you what love feels like without fear. But now, you do know, and knowing changes everything. There comes a moment, quiet and almost unnoticed, when the woman who's always given begins to receive. Not because she asked, not because she begged, but because something in him shifted from taking comfort in her to becoming it. He stops viewing her as a source of warmth to borrow from when he's cold, and starts becoming a fire of his own. And here's the sacred truth no one talks about. When a man is emotionally attached, he stops consuming love and starts creating it. He stops looking to her to fix the holes in him, and begins mending them himself, not out of guilt, but because being loved like that makes him want to be better. Not just for her, but for the little boy inside him who was never allowed to cry. The teenager who learned to shut down. The man who believed love meant losing freedom. Now he sees it differently. Love, to him, begins to feel like freedom with roots. He doesn't lose himself. He finds himself, because in her presence he realizes he can be both strong and soft, brave and broken, a protector and the one being held. And maybe for the first time in his life, he allows himself to be held, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. In the small, unspoken ways that only real connection allows. He leans his head on her chest and hears something deeper than a heartbeat. He hears belonging. He holds her hand not just in public, but when he's afraid, when he's uncertain, when the world feels too loud, too fast, too demanding, and suddenly, her touch becomes an anchor. She becomes the pause between his panic and his peace. And he begins to understand that love isn't a transaction, it's a transformation. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're feeling something stir inside of you. A memory, a longing, a wound you thought had healed, but maybe it only scarred. Because we don't forget the people who almost chose us. We don't forget the men who said the right things but disappeared when we cried 1 minute too long. We don't forget the way we turned ourselves inside out trying to be enough for someone who never really saw us. But I want you to know something now. There are men who attach with their whole hearts. There are men who don't just stay but show up. Men who don't need to be chased, changed, or convinced. Men who choose depth over drama, presence over performance, and truth over temporary comfort. And when that man comes into your life, or maybe he's already there, you'll know. Not because it feels easy, but because it feels safe. You'll exhale. You'll stop watching the door. You'll stop bracing for the leaving, because he won't be reaching for the exit when things get real. He'll be reaching for you.